Have you ever played a game that just stuck with you? I mean, really stuck with you. A game that even a decade later you cannot help but think about. One where every single time you play it, you feel the exact same sense of fascination and wonderment that you did that very first time, so long ago. We're talking a piece of media that truly affected how you view a medium, and helped you realize the kind of things you look for in other offerings from said medium. That is what Dishonored is to me. Every time I think about games as a medium, Dishonored slowly creeps out of the shadows and into the limelight of my mind's eye. What to some may seem at surface level as nothing more than a linear first-person stealth game is to me one of the pinnacles of what creative and passionate developers can achieve when they set their minds to an incredible idea. It is a game that in my eyes flourishes in terms of every element that makes a great game. From its stunning painted visuals, its intensely atmospheric fictional setting, to its incredible gameplay that encourages a power fantasy that few other games have ever replicated. Dishonored is one of my favorite experiences of all time, which is precisely why I wish to shine a limelight on it. Even a decade or more after its release, I believe the game stands up to the test of time. I believe it is a prime example of a game that manages to reach the status of art. I hope that even if you disagree with me, through this video, I will manage to put into words and visuals what it is about it that speaks to me so deeply. Why it was ingrained in my mind for so long. To show to you why I would go so far as to make this incredibly long video by my standards, singing its praises. I will now attempt to take you on a journey with me. One where you can see Dishonored the same way I do. To look at all its elements with my mind's eye, and maybe even convince you to feel the same? Walking right into a painting. Gaming is an incredible medium in what it allows for visually. So many creative artists have fabricated such a variety of worlds and settings that are all enthralling in their own way. This game is no exception. The first thing you will notice about this world is just how unique it looks. There's a certain painterly style that it utilizes to create something distinctly itself. Victor Antonov, the visual design director, stated that
this should look something like coming out of a painter's canvas, or trying to get the narration where you would feel like you're reading a book rather than looking at computer assets.
I think they fully succeeded in this aim. To walk around this fictional place is a treat for the eyes. Even with a very dour and gloomy atmosphere, you just can't help but stop at times and admire the way the waves look like they're straight out of a canvas. How the city reflects what you'd see in older paintings of real cities of old, while adding this sheen of dark industrial sci-fi atop them. In fact, Antonov even states that
we did field trips. We went to London with the art team of Arcane, with their art director Sebastian. We took a lot of photos from Edinburgh, London.
I happen to live in London and have seen Edinburgh many times before. So when I tell you that this game invokes a sort of phantom nostalgia in me with its design, I want you to really grasp what I mean. I have had long walks along the Thames that I feel immediately transported to mentally when I play through this game and stare out at the water. I've entered old industrial buildings and stared along the chimney-blanketed rooftops of old Victorian houses. I have walked among the battlements of preserved castles that look just like the one in the game. When I play Dishonored, I feel almost like I am inhabiting a phantom of places I already know. There is a warm and cozy sort of familiarity, in the misty cold of Dunwall City. It is a condensed version of the places I have spent most of my life in. It is at once both intimately recognizable while also fantastically alien. I stare at this world and I see both the mystical unknown and the welcoming thrum of a dark and grimy place that I call home. There are few other pieces of media, of any form, that have managed to create such an effect for me, where when I enter their world I feel like I belong there, like I have already been there for years. The tinge of British architecture from a number of different eras is all there, all compressed into a sort of time capsule. The devs took inspiration from so many sources and yet still managed to create something distinctly cohesive. Antonov spoke about how they looked at 30s pulp, Lovecraftian imagery, paintings from the 20s, mystical photography, and a number of other sources for inspiration in designing what we can now explore. They even tried to capture the British face in their characters, looking into anatomy and human morphology. Artistically, Dishonored is a masterpiece. You need only look at it and marvel at its intricacies. Dunwall, a city like no other? Antonov was an industrial designer. In his own words,
Dishonored, for me, first of all, represents adding a new fictional place on the map of important non-existing cities. I draw and I paint and I was an industrial designer, so technically I was formed to reproduce things that don't exist in a very realistic way.
I believe that his experience in this field is the reason Dunwall, the city itself, feels so real. It is one of the main characters of Dishonored. Without the city, this game would be missing its soul and substance. They made use of a number of different time periods to produce the version of Dunwall that we see now.
This is London, 1666. It was the last year of the plague and the year of the Great Fire.
It makes perfect sense why the city we inhabit within the game is being torn apart by a mysterious rat plague, why it all looks like it's falling apart. The grime, the filth. It's thick enough that you can almost taste it when you crawl around in the shadows, when you swim through the muck and sewage. They aimed to replicate the same kind of gloomy atmosphere. You rarely see just nice weather in Dunwall. It is always darker. There is fog, rain, an oppressive atmosphere to match the oppressive nature of the regime which rules the city. As one of the art directors, Sébastien Mitton, put it, the light is filtered in a certain way. It is what we studied when we went to London. Further than that, however, they did not stop at one era or a specific time frame. They took and added elements from numerous points in history. You see technology throughout the city that seems far more futuristic. You see a mix of what-if scenarios, things that wouldn't even have existed until the 1800s. Some things that wouldn't even exist today. By doing this, they maintain the heart of all their inspiration, but also manage to construct something that moves further and further away from the real world, gaining an identity of its own. Viktor Antonov stated in an interview that, in terms of who can make a city and how can you make a city, well, that was a privilege reserved to dictators, kings, and big rulers. Nobody can design a city anymore, except for in the video game industry. This mindset and the passion it birthed for creating something special when it came to the city of Dunwall is impossible to miss every single time you take control of Corvo and step into this world.
I want the Dishonored world to leave a souvenir and a memory in the player as if they had really been to this place and it moved them. And I hope it would stay in fiction as one of the places that will give people goosebumps and shivers.
If you ask me, he succeeded completely and utterly. To this day, a piece of Dunwall has remained there, in the back of my mind. When I take one of my long walks around London, be it during a foggy day or at the darkest time of night, I can't help but think back to all those hours spent skulking around a fictional place that carried the exact same essence within it. A fictional place that felt more real than it had any right to. A supernatural assassin. I know, I have chewed your ear off about the art and world of Dishonored. Hopefully I have given you a better understanding of why it resonates so deeply with me, but I can tell some of you have been waiting patiently to hear about, well, the gameplay. Is it good? Would I enjoy the actual parts between staring at the beautiful scenery and the incredible work done by artists and designers to bring it all to life? Well, the answer is a very simple yes.
I really wanted to make one of those games that supports all the values that we've always liked to do at Arcane.
We both realized that we knew games that we were sort of specialists around, like that we loved as players.
I believe there's never been any first-person game where you play the role of a supernatural assassin.
Arcane have always made games with incredible sandboxes for the player character to express themselves in. From Dark Messiah of Might and Magic and the famous ability to kick enemies into every environmental hazard imaginable, to games like Prey 2017, which are more or less full-blown immersive sims. Dishonored is somewhere in the middle of these two games, as you find yourself playing a character with a suite of abilities at your command once an eldritch being comes to you in your hour of need and offers you a deal to help you get revenge on those that wronged you. However, the game itself does not force you to approach in a specific way. You can go throughout the whole game without using a single one of those incredible abilities, and simply sticking to the shadows, knocking threats out, and finding non-lethal ways to get rid of your targets. The game has what the developers call a chaos rating. Depending on how violent and bloodthirsty your style of play is, the chaos meter will go either towards low or high chaos, which will affect which of the two endings you get. So there is something for everyone here. The stealthy, unseen thief fan can very much have the kind of experience he is looking for, and the player such as myself, who loves to mess around with a number of different abilities and mechanics in a very complex sandbox, is allowed to let loose. As you can see, the suite of powers are utterly incredible. You can stop time, blink between locations, summon hordes of rats to eat your targets alive, possess living creatures to move between locations, blast enemies away and off high places. If you so choose, you can play and feel like a god. Truly a supernatural assassin in a world where there is nobody capable of matching the ungodly powers at your disposal. Well, almost anyone.
The rest of the men in place. Nice try, Corporal.
ほう、向かってくるのか。近づかなきゃ、てめえをぶちのめせないんでな。ほうほう。
Afraid to face me? I'm disappointed. Thanks for ticking the clock. I'm waiting for this. Let's see Ambience. Two others could fight. Get to ticking the clock. Test yourselves. I have one more surprise for you. I ask for my life. Make your choice. Extraordinary.
My goal is that everything that the player wants to do
You should be able to do it.
The devs knocked this goal out of the park. Part of the fun of going back to this game over and over again throughout the years for me is just how much you can hone your understanding of the powers and the way they interact with the world and obstacles that you are faced with. A creative player has so much freedom to do things that you'd never be outright told you can do, but can absolutely figure out yourself if you think about them.
I watched a guy the other day do something I'd never seen in Dishonored before. He was running away after killing off a couple of high-profile assassination targets, 2 members of parliament, and he was up high on a balcony. And the jump would have killed him because it was maybe 4 stories up, but he had the possession power. And in our game, when you possess somebody, it's not like you leave your body behind and possess them with your mind. It's a corporeal thing, so you move physically into them, and then you pilot them around. And so he jumped off of this balcony 4 stories up and plummeted to the ground, and I thought he was going to die. He was on the pavement next to the river. But he was angling for this guard that was walking a patrol down there, and as he got close to the guard, he activated the possession power and moved into the guy, and it kills the inertia of the fall, and he lived and walked past the other guards who didn't know anything was wrong. And that is a moment you can't have in another game.
Some of the powers even interact in incredibly interesting ways, allowing you to use an ability and then another to make something utterly insane take place, or combine an ability with one of your many knives, guns, bows, explosives, and the list goes on. Even the devs themselves could not have foreseen some of the interactions their incredibly well-made and detailed sandbox has allowed for.
Once a programmer came back to us and he shot a little video of something that was really fun and wanted to show us. So what he did was that he summoned a set of rats, then he froze time, then he pulled out the spring razor, which is this kind of mine that you can stick to things. So he could actually froze the rat, stick the mine to the rat, then he possessed the rat, and then he moved the rat around and close to a guard and ejected as the mine exploded.
Some of my favorite moments included those interactions, and when I would discover that I could do something truly out of this world. For example, say you stop time right as somebody fires their weapon at you in the game. Their bullet will have already left the barrel of the gun and be hanging there in midair. Now you could simply step out of the way of it, but what you can also do is possess the person that fired said bullet, walk them in front of their own gun, and wait for time to resume. I can think of few games that have made me feel both more badass, but also intelligent in how they allow me to freely take the tools they provided to me and use them however I see fit. A tale as old as time.
I don't know about you, Corvo, but I've had a lovely time. Intrigue and mystery, butchery and betrayal, the death throes of an empire. And you were an avenging spirit, spreading chaos at every turn. The city's feeding on itself now, liars and merchants and nobles like maggots on a carcass. Soon will be nothing left for the rats. It's just as well. The empire was dying already, completely rotten. All that was needed was the right man to send it over the edge.
Ah yes, time to discuss the story of Dishonored. Spoilers, by the way, if you want to play it and don't want to go knowing in too much. Please skip to the time shown on the screen. Well, it's not the most complex when taken at face value. You are Corvo Attano, Lord Protector of the Empress, who is also secretly your lover. One day you return from a trip abroad where you had been searching for any sort of potential cure to a rat plague that is decimating the island of Bristol. You make it to the capital, Dunwall, empty-handed, only to witness the Empress murdered by a group of supernatural hitmen, and you immediately framed for her death and tossed into prison. You, of course, need to get your revenge however you see fit. Overthrow the traitorous new regent Hiram Burrows and save Emily, the daughter you and your Empress had that is now the heir to the kingdom. Sounds like the setup for quite the conventional little revenge story, doesn't it? Well, this is where Dishonored swerves a tad and adds in a little bit of spice. You are approached by the Outsider. He may look like some guy with void black contacts, but he's actually an eldritch being that has been around for thousands of years, and acts almost like a source of dark magic in this world. He brands your hand with his mark, offering you your powers, and just lets you loose on Dunwall to set things right, or wrong. The Outsider gives off this unnerving impression that he doesn't actually care what happens, one way or the other, but he wishes to see what events transpire, almost as entertainment for himself. I personally don't care much for the main revenge story, but the hints of mysticism, magic, and a dark world of otherworldly things that is present in the shadows of Dishonored's main plot managed to get me quite invested in the narrative nevertheless. I find characters like the Outsider absolutely engrossing conceptually and narratively, as well as the implications of what his existence and other supernatural characters you meet throughout the game means for the world. I have always been a fan of cosmic horror and occult narratives, as they allow what could otherwise be a by-the-book story to evolve into something where forces far beyond your understanding are at play in the background, changing the very fabric of narrative reality. Dishonored nails this idea, and the effect that it creates. What also helps it stand above many other games narratively is the absolutely incredible voice cast they got. We are talking some of my favorite actors, period, all voicing different characters in this game. From Brad Dourif, favorite to any Deadwood fan, as the quirky scientist Piero, Lena Headey as Callista, John Slattery of Mad Men fame as Havelock, Michael Madsen as Daud, Chloe Grace Moretz as the Princess Emily. For years, I never even realized as a kid just how many incredibly talented actors were involved with this project, but the overwhelming amount of skill can be heard in every single interaction, every syllable spoken, and the way each character is really well characterized just by their mannerisms and their delivery. All of this works in tandem to turn what would otherwise be a boilerplate revenge story and transform it into something much more compelling and mysterious. Daud. Just Daud. So for those who might be unaware, Dishonored released 2 different pieces of story DLC, where you play as the supernatural assassin who killed the Empress at the start of the game. Daud, voiced by Michael Madsen, is a far more interesting character than Corvo, mainly because Corvo is a completely silent protagonist in Dishonored, whereas Daud has a very well-developed personality, and became a lot of people's fan-favorite character in the game and series. The DLCs provide you with some entirely new and breathtaking areas to sneak and murder your way through, as well as a few abilities to differentiate Daud from Corvo, allowing for a whole new set of ways to apply his powers to the sandbox and experiment to your heart's content. Daud himself is the head of a gang of mercenaries and assassins known as the Whalers, who have a particularly slick aesthetic that makes them instantly recognizable, both in the main game where you fight them as Corvo, and in the DLC where you are able to summon and utilize them as allies, since they are part of your gang. You get to witness firsthand his relationship with his ragtag group that he has put together through years of carrying his own mark of the Outsider, and even find out he has the ability to transfer fragments of his power to others, which is why a lot of them also possess these supernatural abilities. You spend time getting to better know his right-hand woman, Billy Lurk, who may end up quite important in the future entries of this series, and also deal with Delilah, who is both the main antagonist of the DLC and becomes the main antagonist in the direct sequel to the main game. All in all, in these DLCs you only find more of everything that makes Dishonored so special, allowing you to see additional incredible art, world design, and a fun mix and match of powers and weapons. It is one of few games that can boast such a strong DLC offering, almost to the point where I would say it's mandatory that you play through it as well as the main story. The development Daud gets completely changes the way you view him when playing as Corvo, and might even offer enough context for you to completely change whether you decide to spare his life or not when the two of them cross paths. Ambience For All. One aspect that I believe I need to touch on is the absolutely enthralling OST. You may have noticed it, as it's been the music for this entire video. The soundtrack was composed by the immensely talented Daniel Licht, who tragically passed away in 2017. You may have heard his work elsewhere if you've ever watched Dexter, as he wrote the score for the entire TV series. He also worked on the soundtracks for Silent Hill Downpour and Book of Memories, which, while they might not be the best of games, his music is still as great as ever. Personally, I find his work on Dishonored to be masterful, and one of my favorite game OSTs of all time. It is so deeply atmospheric and manages to set the stage for this incredibly designed world in a way that's almost symbiotic. I could not think of the world of Dishonored without thinking of Licht's score. His work elevates the sense of ominous foreboding and gloom that just seems to hang in the air throughout Dunwall. It fits the setting perfectly. It focuses mainly on the use of a number of traditional instruments in very fascinating ways. A violin is always the primary instrument that you'll hear in this soundtrack. He made great use of harmonics, an overtone that you hear when you place your finger softly on the string. It creates a whistling sound, and in some harmonics, a different or higher note. This effect can be overheard throughout the music he created for this world, and it ended up birthing a very clear identity for it. During the pre-production of Dishonored, we defined two main guidelines for our music, said Thomas Mitten, senior sound designer at Arcane Lyon. We knew we wanted to avoid brass instruments and instead favor stringed instruments, especially the cello and harpsichord, to support the nostalgia of a once flourishing empire in decline. From there, we established our second main guideline. Our music had to be a part of the city of Dunwall, he said. We need to make sure it was directly integrated into the game as living material, not as simple aesthetic dressing. This is hugely important to every project we take on. Some of the other instruments you'll hear throughout the OST are cellos, a cymbalom, the dulcimer, and a piano. All of these work in tandem to create the vibe of a post-Victorian industrial city. There was also the introduction of tribal drums and more percussion for the action-heavy moments of gameplay. Licht further created two vocal pieces of music that ended up being quite iconic for the game. The Drunken Wailer, which is a direct play on the classic Drunken Sailor shanty, but adapted in-universe for this rather alien world, as well as the credit track for Honor for All. It is a profoundly moody soundtrack that acts as the perfect final touch to what is an excellent game. The Gift of the Outsider. Here we are. I find myself hoping that this video does manage to translate my feelings for this game into a form that others can both understand and appreciate. I have been going back and forth and replaying it over and over for 10 years now, and will continue to do so for the foreseeable future. And maybe, just maybe, some of you will as well. Dishonored will forever hold a special place in my heart. It managed to enchant me all the way back on the PS3, and I bought it again as soon as I found myself in possession of a PC able to run video games. It stuck with me as one of the most atmospheric experiences of its time, and still holds up to this day. It's a game I honestly love, and can only hope is never forgotten, as it remains a great example of just how amazing an original idea can be when it blossoms due to the hard work of truly passionate people. And I mean, who doesn't like whale punk? What a cool aesthetic. I'd say Dishonored is a gift worth accepting. This video took me a long time to make, much longer than anything else I've made on this channel. It has been a passion project that I was already spitballing with myself a year before this channel ever came into being. Hopefully you've enjoyed it, because I am planning to turn this into a sort of long-running series for the channel, where I create love letters to different video games I hold in high regard, so I can just go over how they impacted me and why I strongly recommend them to, well, everyone. Dishonored just felt like the right place to start with such a series, as it really is a special gem of an experience. Please, remember to like, comment, subscribe, share my content, I will continue to not have any social media accounts on sites like Twitter and Reddit, so I can't really go around promoting these videos much. I can guarantee there will be many more in the works to come, and not just part of this series, don't worry. Other small projects are also in the works, akin to the videos I've posted on the channel already, so it should be fun. Hopefully you guys keep having more stuff to come back to. But yeah, that's about it. Have a good one, and I'll see you on the next video.